official title?
Connie Duvall. I'm a Child Welfare Specialist 3 in Cleveland County.
And how long have you been in the field?
I started in 1989 in Memphis, Tennessee. I then went back to school for 2 years to get my master's. I then started in Memphis again. I worked for 5 years in child welfare, moved to Oklahoma, and I've been here 16 years, and I've worked for therapeutic foster care and child welfare that whole time. When I was a little girl, my mom used to play the Elvis song In the Ghetto. She was a huge Elvis fan. And I would listen to the song and I would think about poor people, because that's what the song's about, and kids dying in the street and people needing help. And I used to think someone should do something about that. And then in high school, I was introduced to the profession of social work. I became very interested in it and decided that's what I wanted to do with my career.
Okay. And in your opinion, what is the most effective method to treat juveniles, delinquents?
Prevention is the first line of defense, as we say. We need to identify at-risk youth and families very early. That's why programs such as Sooner Start and Head Start are so vital to identify those at-risk youth. We need to put intensive in-home services with the families. And if that doesn't work, because there will always be families that unfortunately fall through the proverbial cracks, we can do intensive in-home services when they reach the age of teenage years, where they usually start becoming more, the system starts to recognize them more. Treatment, trauma therapy, working with the family on how to cope with a child or a teenager who is acting out, possibly committing crimes or doing drugs, is very vital. Encouraging the family, being supportive of that family, and a wraparound approach is really vital to help the entire family heal and not just focus on the teenager that's in trouble, but focus on the family system.
Pointless to treat.
I do think that all children in the system can be helped. A lot of what they're dealing with is a learned behavior and part of a larger family system, which is why you have to treat the whole family and not just the juvenile. There are some children with profound mental health issues from either a cognitive disorder or trauma that was left untreated that require higher levels of care than in-home. But I do not believe it's pointless to ever try and help a juvenile and their family.
And what do you do to help juveniles in the foster care system?
We at first identify the family and identify the safety threats, what behaviors need to change in order to make the family a safe place for children to live in. If the children have to be removed from the family because of their delinquent behavior, which does occur. Sometimes the parents are not able to control their child's behavior. They become a child in need of supervision, and at that point the state, child welfare, and Office of Juvenile Affairs becomes involved. Our first option is treatment. We identify mental health concerns, substance abuse concerns, trauma, truancy, delinquent behavior. We often will try to do inpatient care if they have a identified mental health diagnosis and or substance abuse issue, try and get that under control. If they are delinquent, as in committing crimes, then they will be placed in detention. They can be placed in a group home, and that's not only for their safety, but the safety of the community, the safety of their family. We then, when we kind of control the crisis and we put effective services with the family, effective treatment planning, effective service providers, again going back to that wraparound approach to help this family, then we work very hard to place that child back in the family and work to build that family up so that they can protect themselves and the child and live as a family unit.
Juvenile delinquents.
The state operates under the Children's Code. It's Title 10 of the legal definitions of what is a juvenile delinquent. Normally, and what that is called is a child in need of supervision, a child in need of care and control under either the child welfare system or the Office of Juvenile Affairs system, and a lot of times we work in tandem together. We work through those policies to specifically identify a child in need of supervision, either based on their actions, which often are criminal, and they come under the attention of a juvenile judge. That judge will often refer them to OJA, the Family to Child Welfare. And through that system, the policies in place are basically to help the juvenile and to help the family. The OJA has a set of policies, Child Welfare has a set of policies, but the main policy is called the Children's Code. It's Title 10.
Okay. And what is the hardest thing you've had to deal with in your job?
A child death. Those are always very sad, very hard. Has a mom, has someone that has to work with, often parents who have unfortunately killed their child, and then you look at the history of that family and you realize that maybe with some prevention services in place, mainly substance abuse treatment and mental health treatment, maybe that tragedy could have been avoided. I think the other hardest part is working with families where the generational issues are so profound that the parents simply cannot overcome the safety threats and make the appropriate behavioral changes in order to have their children safely returned home. Telling a child that their parents are not able to take care of them. We often say, mommy or daddy have things they have to work on. That's very hard. I don't care how old the child, every child loves their parents. Even I've worked with some horrifically abused children, and they all, well, they don't all, many of them will cry for their parents. They will cry to go home. That bond is profound. So I think those are two of the hardest issues child welfare workers face.
So is it hard to leave work at work, or do you bring work home with you?
I've learned, as I've been in the field longer, ways to not bring work home with me. But yes, it's very hard to not bring it home with you. When I was a younger child welfare worker and I had young children, I often cried on my way home from work. It's hard not to imagine that your child is hurt or your child being abused. When you see abused children, it's hard to cope with people that abuse their children because you can't fathom why. As I've gained experience in the field, I've gotten better at trying to understand the abuser and where they come from, what their needs are. In our society, we tend to be very punitive towards people that hurt children, but I think that if you look at the underlying causes, there's a reason for it. It's almost like the breadcrumb theory. You can go back and trace those breadcrumbs and see where the dysfunction started and how they ended up where they are. Not that I'm excusing child abuse in any form or fashion, and I do believe that children have to be protected at all cost. But as I've gotten older and wiser and in the field more, my education is better. I've done a lot more trainings, trauma trainings and things like that. You understand the whole system. So yes, it's easier not to bring it home now. We also have recognized secondary trauma in the field of social work, juvenile delinquency, child welfare, mental health, substance abuse. There are peer support groups that are available to us in the field. I take full advantage of those. I do a lot of reading. I like to exercise. Self-care is vital in this field and taking care of yourself. So the answer is kind of a yes and a no. Yes, it's very hard not to bring it home. There are ways to learn to do it. And I guess no, I don't bring it home with me as much as I used to.
Job.
Watching families change and grow, seeing their, I call it the aha moment, where the treatment planning works, the services work, the team, the wraparound services come together, the child welfare specialist, the attorneys involved, the providers that work with the families, which are the backbone of child welfare and juvenile delinquency. Watching that family get it, grow, change, watching children trust their parents again, that bond, sustaining trauma and coming through it is amazing. It's why I do this. I've always said that if I ever stop believing that people can change, that families can change, that families can come back together, that's the day I walk away. I'm done, because then I know that my role here is no longer going to be a helpful role. I also like adoption. I think that when, as I said before, families can't overcome the challenges and children have to have their parental rights are terminated, they're placed in permanent custody, finding that child that new home is amazing. Watching them bond, watching them grow, watching people who didn't give birth to that child love them so much and provide for them. Hearing a case closed is wonderful, whether children go home and the case is closed after 6 months successful reunification, or the case is closed due to adoption. That's a good feeling, that beginning first step to the final step. It's kind of like raising a child, watching that child from infancy grow up to be an adult and seeing the good things that come from that. So I have amazing coworkers. We have an amazing support staff in child welfare. I know that a lot of times what you hear from the press and other people, we're not painted in the most positive light, but the interagency communication, the interagency cooperation is really well played out in Oklahoma. And the training that we are now doing with new child welfare workers is really, really well. They come into the field very well prepared, more prepared than I was 20-something years ago. So those are all very positive things that I enjoy about my job.
Okay. And how many caseloads are social workers legally supposed to have, and how many do you actually have?
Per the Pinnacle Plan, which was started, we're in our 4th year, which came about from child welfare being sued for the care of our foster children. A child welfare specialist is supposed to have 15 children on their caseload. 95% of the state is at that capacity right now. They are all meeting the requirements of the Pinnacle Plan. Unfortunately, Tulsa, Oklahoma County, and Cleveland County, the 3 major counties in the state of Oklahoma, we're struggling to meet those Pinnacle Plan numbers. In Cleveland County, our average caseload is 29 children per child welfare specialist. Now, those are the child welfare specialists who have a year's experience. When you come out of CORE, which is our training program, up until your first year, you have to stay within Pinnacle Plan numbers. We are trying desperately to hire new child welfare specialists to keep the new workers with us, so that we can all have, after that year, I think we'll have 8 new workers in Cleveland County that can be 100%, which will help the other 27 workers. It will help ease their caseload. But unfortunately, Cleveland County is not meeting the Pinnacle Plan numbers right now. My caseload at this present time, I have 23 children and 9 families, because I am now doing family-centered service, which is prevention, intensive in-home services. So my numbers are a little different. I can have up to 10 cases only. There's not a limit on children.